Okay. As some of you have probably heard, and I know that you are completely heartbroken about it, Natasha Lyonne of Russian Doll and Fred Armisen of Saturday Night Live have ended their relationship. It's over. In a press release, she states, and I quote, "I honestly think we broke up because I wanted a swimming pool. We love each other just about as much as two people can possibly love each other, and we're still talking all the time, but Freddie doesn't like a swimming pool. It might seem like a mundane reason for a breakup, but during that pandemic, you got to get your laps." Statistics tell us that 1 in 3 marriages are likely to fail. In her column in the New York Times a couple of weeks ago, Anglican priest Tish Harrison Warren says that FOMO, fear of missing out, is one of the greatest reasons for divorce. The contemporary understanding of a healthy, fulfilled marriage can be a complicated one. Christians and non-believers alike would agree that when you're choosing a partner, it is a very critical decision. How many of you would agree that choosing the right partner is important? Okay, so we all agree on that. And that ultimately we need to remember that our partner is going to let us down in some way or another over the course of a lifetime. Now, the Jesus followers' idea of marriage and the world's idea of marriage diverge, right? In many different ways. But the world's idea of a soulmate that will single-handedly bring us our highest level of happiness is one that maybe we should just check a little bit. Warren argues that we should normalize some sort of dissatisfaction and disappointment in our marriage relationships. Those of you who have been married for 20 years or more, how many of you had a little disappointment at some point in your marriage? Okay, yes? What? Some of you just looked at your wife and said, "What?" How many of you, your spouse was disappointing to you at some point? Any less of you? You liars. Now you're afraid I'm going to call you out. There are going to be times when our marriage relationships are going to be hard. Warren points out that if we as a culture view seeking personal fulfillment as our sacred duty, staying in an unhappy marriage staying in an unhappy marriage is then seen as an act of self-betrayal. To put that another way, relationships that require a lot of work are often seen as handcuffs to our happiness potential. And as a result, those who stay in relationships, and I've heard this before in other people around me, those who stay in relationships that have some difficulty, even when they feel convicted that they're supposed to continue to stay in there and work on the marriage, that they're often called out to do something different. Why are you even staying with that guy? Why do you even stay with her? But we have to remember that it is not our spouse's job to make us happy. Now, hear me out for a second. In a culture that promises infinite options for pleasure, sometimes fears can develop that we just aren't experiencing as much life satisfaction as we otherwise could if the grass was greener on our spouse's other side. And so as a result of that, we're just constantly in the back of our mind thinking, well, if I wasn't with her, well, if I wasn't with him. And as a result of that, the fear of missing out that pervades almost every aspect of modern life can begin to creep into your relationship. In his book, The Paradox of Choice, a guy named Barry Schwartz, smarter guy than me, points out the very option of being allowed to change our minds seems to increase the chances that we will change our minds. And when we can change our minds about decisions, we are less satisfied with our decision. See, constant mind changing is a part of our restless desire for maximum satisfaction, which can frame even divorce as something like a radical act of self-love. And these folks prioritize personal fulfillment above everything else. In Romans 8:12 and 13, the Apostle Paul says, "So my brothers and sisters, we must not be ruled by our sinful selves or live the way our sinful selves want. If you use your lives to do the wrong things your sinful selves want, you will die spiritually." In other words, as Christians, our obligation is not to our own experience of satisfaction and fulfillment and pleasure. Our obligation is to God and what it is that He wants for our lives. Now, there are situations, full disclosure, caveat here, there are situations of physical abuse or sexual abuse that give you the option to leave your spouse absolutely guilt-free. But for others of us who are in a marriage at times that is difficult, at times where there are struggles, at times where your spouse just isn't making you happy, what if there are times in your marriage when the Bible's call to love your enemies and the call to love your spouse are the same call? Let's be clear, there are some people who are in dangerous homes who need to find safety, and they have God's and our blessing and our compassion. And there are others who are just expecting their spouse to be God in their life, and that is unfair and unattainable. God alone is your source of joy. Go to Him. You do not need a pool to make you happy. Though it helps, I'm sure. And this is where Jesus and culture meet.